If you're anything like me, when you hear the word zombie, there may be several franchises that come to mind, but one that always stands out is Resident Evil. Resident Evil, or Biohazard as it's known throughout the rest of the world, was one of the titles that helped shape the survival horror genre itself. However, as the years have went on, Resident Evil has evolved, just like the infamous strands of viruses that the series is based off of. As the main series of games grew in number, boundaries and even the genre itself were pushed to new limits. Spin-off titles grew in number, tackling genres like on-rail shooters, Game Boy ports, and even co-op experiences were created to fill a divide that was slowly happening. As the next Resident Evil is slated to release just a few days from now, we here at Split Screen want to take you on a journey and see just how our beloved Resident Evil has evolved into some new creature only to find itself coming back full circle. When Resident Evil was released on the original PlayStation back in 1996, there were many staples established that created what many consider to be core elements of the series. For starters, the action was viewed from fixed camera angles, with 3D models placed on top of static rendered backgrounds. And now, while at first glance this may seem like it was a design choice to add to the terror of the game, it was ultimately to assist with memory issues. This development secret helped the game stay within memory restraints, and it helped in the production of future games. Aside from the graphical style, this title also managed to put a stronger connection between the player and their inventory. Ammo and healing items were not just randomly thrown about the world. They had to be used in conjunction with player tactics to really make it through the game. You couldn't just go around firing your gun all willy-nilly and shit, pew pew pew. At its base, Resident Evil did attempt to strike its own path. But just like many other beloved franchises, it had roots in puzzle solving and exploration. Sure, the atmosphere could come off as campy and sometimes kinda silly, but the control scheme, coupled with the gameplay, shrugged off any doubts that anybody had about the sheer stress that this game could deliver. Characters moved in a tight X and Y axis, and they couldn't run and gun. They had to stay stationary when firing at the enemies present. This also went hand in hand with the several types of enemies that you do encounter in the game, and it made it really difficult to get comfortable when you were presented with a new foe. Now, with all of the horrible live-action intro acting and the offbeat voiceovers aside, Resident Evil did do a great job painting a mystery with a setting based more in science and biology rather than fantasy and fiction. Under the pretense of a pharmaceutical company testing ghastly biological experiments on specially trained police officers and the public, there was plenty to be afraid of in Raccoon City and the Spencer Mansion. These games and their sequels, Resident Evil 2 and 3 Nemesis, kept a very similar art style, with urban aesthetics and a slight sense of American Horror Story charm. The only real change came from the scenarios present. While the first game was isolated to the mansion in the woods, Resident Evil 2 and 3 see our protagonists exploring the wreckage in Raccoon City or the police station as the T-virus has spread and turned the residents of the city into zombies. It isn't until the government sends in a missile to cleanse the breakout that we begin to see a change in the tried and true formula. During Code Veronica, we begin to see a change in the series. The characters still control in the same tight control scheme that they did previously, where you turn like a tank. But the setting is drastically different. We begin to see these fantastical humans appear that seem more like demigods with supernatural powers instead of the campy, cliche horror villains that we got previously. This sudden shift began to gear the game in a whole different direction, while keeping the biological threat very much real. It began to make the player feel more like a pawn in a bigger picture, rather than a talented survivor of a freak accident. It also continued to push the use of the inventory system, which now surmounted bigger risks, and in return, bigger rewards. It wasn't until Resident Evil Outbreak that things began to shift even more. While there had always been a team dynamic built into the earlier titles, it wasn't anything like we had seen in the multiplayer-based Outbreak, where each character had more of a class-based system and specialty weapons. Needless to say, this style didn't particularly win over that many new players to the franchise. It was something new and unique, but it was playing off the familiar territory set in Raccoon City. The true paradigm shift wouldn't come until the next title. Resident Evil 4 was considerably different than any other game that came before it. The familiar character of Leon Kennedy was really one of the only things that tied this title to the previous titles. Mechanically, this game was a third-person action game with more emphasis on action and reaction rather than inventory management and exploration. Instead of players conserving ammo and running past foes, Resident Evil was geared to have players tackle enemies head-on and threw the franchise completely on its head. Survival was more about spraying bullets and using melee blows to take out your opponents, who were smarter than Raccoon City zombies, but they were still monstrous enough to be considered less than human. This trend of Resident Evil moving more towards action-based gameplay followed with Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6. While 5 suffered from some growing pains of being a co-op-centric version of 4, it did have a very different setting, which made the world of Resident Evil seem just a bit bigger. As for Resident Evil 6, it tried to bridge some gaps in the story, but it ultimately was too ambitious, and it felt as though it really lacked the proper hook to catch on with many gamers. With the reveal of Resident Evil 7 and its renewed focus on survival, with a smaller roster of dangerous enemies, and the fact that the game is first person, players are now encouraged to use the environment to explore and unravel all the mysteries that the game has to offer. With a unique take on puzzles and inventory manipulation, Resident Evil 7 isn't a recreation of the first title, but it's rather a love letter to what the original started all those years ago. Now I want to let you know that the VR teaser for Resident Evil 7 is probably the most terrified I've ever been of a game. Like, seriously, kinda almost peed my pants. It's pretty scary. But anyways, that wraps up today's video. I'm gonna get out of here. If you guys enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button. It helps us out a great deal, and we really do appreciate it. And if you're new to Split Screen and you want to keep up with the latest gaming news, reviews, and entertainment, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button, hit the bell, turn on notifications. That way you know as soon as we upload. We would really enjoy if you guys would stick around and check out some of our other videos. But anyways, my name is Cody. I'm going to get out of here. Thank you guys for watching Split Screen. Have an awesome day.